This is Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana University basketball discussion, hosted by Inside the Hall founder and editor, Alex Bozich. Since 2007, Inside the Hall has been trusted by IU fans across the globe to be the one-stop shop for IU basketball news, commentary, and analysis. Join us over at InsideTheHall.com. That's InsideTheHall.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Podcast on the Brink, and we're pleased to be joined this week. I think it's the first time we've had a Big Ten MVP on the show. We've had Victor Oladipo, we've had Cody Zeller in the past. Neither one of those guys were a Big Ten MVP. We've got Brian Evans on the show this week. Brian, thanks for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So, Brian, before we dive into, obviously, the hiring of Mike Woodson and your career at IU and you know, the last 20 years or so and what has worked and what hasn't worked for IU basketball, I'm curious kind of what you're up to now in your day-to-day life. I understand that you and Steve Green have a business partnership, and I'm just kind of curious kind of what's going on with that and what you can tell us kind of about what your life has been like since playing at IU and in the NBA.
Sure. I live on the north side of Indianapolis, actually in Carmel, and I have 4 children, a beautiful wife, and we're busy as heck. We got all our kids are ages from 3rd grade to 10th grade, and a lot of activities, a lot of sports, keeping us busy. And I got a new business. It's about a year old. Steve Green, so one of my favorite IU guys of all time, and a great player. He and I started a business together. It's called Aurora. It's a specialty sleep clinic. We're on the north side, in between the Keystone and Castleton malls, and we treat snoring and sleep apnea with custom-made oral devices. It's a business that Steve was a dentist for a lot of years, and he got very interested in what we refer to as dental sleep medicine. So people that, have sleep apnea, struggled with trying to wear a CPAP, and Steve can make them a custom-made oral device. It's the equivalent like a retainer that you'd wear in your mouth at night, but it keeps your jaw in the correct position and correct snoring and sleep apnea. So Steve and I are scaling this business. We're having a ton of fun while we're doing it. He's a fantastic guy and a great friend.
How did you and Steve kind of come together? Obviously, former IU players are like family, but you obviously are from different eras of IU basketball. So how did this kind of come together just in terms of you two working to each other or with each other? And I was watching an interview where you talked about, the first time you met Steve Green, I think you were a freshman at IU and he came talk to the team. So what's your relationship been like over the years? And obviously you've grown closer here in recent years with this business.
Yeah, so, I met Steve probably my first couple months on campus. I was 17 years old, and Coach Knight would always have friends of his, former players come in, some just like Bob Costas and Jim Nance and Johnny Bench. And, Coach always had people come in, people that were, leaders in their field and whatever they're doing. Coach would have them come in and speak to the team. The first former player that he brought in was Steve Green, who was a dentist at the time, and he's a guy that played pro basketball, played for the Pacers for a while, and had obviously a great playing career at IU, and then went on to do great things off the court and has been very successful. And Coach loved bringing guys like that around us just so we could see hear success in basketball and beyond. And I just remember as Steve talked to the team, he was Coach Knight's first ever recruit. He was an impressive guy, impressive speaker. So every year he'd come in and talk, and he was one of my favorite guys to listen to. He's just really engaging, great personality, just a great all-around guy. Didn't really lose touch with him. We just didn't really have a friendship at all. And then about 5 years ago, another former player, Joe Hillman, had bumped into Steve like at one of their kids' basketball games or something, and Steve was talking about his interest in growing this business, and Joe Hillman's actually the one that said, "Hey, you need to talk to Brian," because I had a medical device background, and here this device that Steve was very excited about is it's kind of in the vicinity of being a medical device, and he put us together, and we started having breakfast, once a month and talking about what he was wanting to do. And over time, the more I understood it, became interested, and I figured out a way to do what we're doing, which is very disruptive to that space. But really, we started spending some time together talking, and he was kind of giving me an education on sleep apnea that I was unaware of, and relationship just kept growing, and we decided to take it to the next level.
So I want to go back to the time before you came to IU. You weren't the most decorated recruit when you came to Bloomington. What was the recruiting process like for you? And what was it like for you? Obviously, most kids in Indiana, I'm not sure if this fits you, but grow up dreaming of playing at Indiana. What was it like for you to get that opportunity when Coach Knight did ultimately offer you a scholarship to Indiana?
Well, it wasn't and they didn't talk about it like they do now. It wasn't like 5-star, 4-star, 3-star.
Right.
If it had been, I don't know what maybe I would have had 2 stars. I don't know. But I certainly wasn't a national kind of recruit or anything like that. And I did, I had a handful of schools that were interested in watching me, and it was Evansville, Western Illinois, Butler, Ball State, Indiana State a little bit. Those were the schools that were recruiting me the most. And then at the start of my senior year, Wake Forest got involved. I had a good summer leading up to my senior year, and Wake Forest, it was coming around. If I had to, I probably would have been there. That's probably where I would have gone, Wake. And really at the 11th hour, so Coach, at some point in time, it was that season, right, the commitment season, and guys players that they were interested in, I guess, were committing elsewhere. And at one point in time, so this was like October, Ron Felling came over and watched me play a little bit, and I guess he had convinced Coach to at least come over and take a look at me. Coach never called my house, never visited my house. He just came over to my high school one afternoon and watched me play for a little bit. And, I spent maybe 3 minutes with him. It's a funny story if you want to hear it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we're sitting. He just came in and wanted to watch me shoot a little bit. So he sent me over to a basket, by myself, and just rebounded for myself and shot some jumpers. And then he called me back over and said, hey, put together a 3-on-3 game. And I did that. He watched 5 minutes of that, and then he called me back over and said, hey, put together a 5-on-5 and a full scrimmage. And we didn't really have any of our team there. Most of the guys played football, so football was going on. So it was a pretty ragtag group of guys in this scrimmage, and he didn't even want to watch it. It was too painful for him to watch. So we ended up, maybe 30 minutes of watching me total, and then we went into my high school coach's office, and Coach and I sat down, which was so cool to me as just being a huge Indiana fan as a kid. Regardless, I really didn't think he was going to want me or offer me a scholarship. So I was just thrilled that I had at least gotten good enough that, Bob Knight came to my high school and, had an opportunity to play in front of him. So he really caught me off guard. He invited my father and I to come over that weekend to see a football game and show us the campus. And, I remember driving over there with my father, just going, am I really getting recruited by them? This cannot be. This can't be. And we got there, and honestly, we sat in the locker room with Coach. He spent about 5 or 10 minutes with us, and basically said, hey, I don't know why Brian Evans would want to play anywhere other than Indiana University. What do you think about that? And I nodded my head yes, and he goes, Indiana University doesn't want Brian Evans playing anywhere except right here. What do you think about that? I nodded my head, and he stuck out his hand and shook my hand. My dad and I left to go watch the football game. I mean, literally, he did that, shook my hand, and got up and walked out of the locker room. my dad and I weren't sure what to do. We went over to the football game. We sat there for the first half and then looked at each other like, hey, you want to get out of here? And we did. We left. We're about halfway home back to Terre Haute, and my dad looks at me and says, now, is that does that count as a verbal commitment? Did you just verbally commit to IU? And my answer was, I don't know. I really don't know. It just didn't seem like it could be true. So
yeah.
I'm back. I get home. I go to my best buddy's house, and I'm like, "You're not going to believe this." And he knows how big of a fan I was. He was a huge IU fan as well. I said, "I think I just committed to IU." And he's like, "Oh, BS, you did not." I said, "No, I'm serious. I really think I did." And he's the only person I told. And we're back in school like the following Monday, and I want to say it's like 6th, 7th period, and my high school coach comes to the classroom and pulls me out of class, and he's jumping out of his skin. He's all excited. And he goes, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me you committed to IU? Oh, my gosh, you're going to go play for Bob Knight. And that's when that's when I knew that I was going there. At that moment is when I knew that I actually had committed. Believe it or not, it's a true story.
So you get there, and it's already a really good situation that you're walking into. I'm curious, like, the first workouts and the first practices, I'm sure there were times where you were guarding somebody like Calbert Chaney. What's that like the first time it happens?
I was a young freshman. So like I said, I was maybe 17 my first couple months in Bloomington. And I was a little bit of a late developer, I would guess, is the best way to describe me. And so it was like a boy playing with men. I mean, these guys were just so much bigger and stronger than I was, and quicker than I was, and these are guys that I can't emphasize enough how big of an Indiana basketball fan I've been my whole life. So I knew all these guys and their high school stats, and I mean, it was the strangest thing was going from being a fan to a peer of these guys, and because I knew everything about all of them. Luckily, they didn't know I was some stalker, some IU basketball stalker like I was. But yeah, it was that first few months. It was tough getting used to it, and it's so demanding. I mean, Coach Knight is so demanding, and I learned a lot that first year. I was lucky enough to redshirt, and that redshirt year was so pivotal for me because I was able to really get my bearings and relax and not worry about not playing. I was just practicing. I felt myself. I was getting better. Coach was just fantastic. He pushed you every day. It was working for me. I mean, I could feel I was making really great strides, and I could tell, right? So I was never resisted, his teachings. And yeah, he's tough on you, but it was really working for me, and I was getting better. So that first year, the ability to redshirt on what was a really good team, I'm sure I wouldn't have played much had I not redshirted. So it was really important for me to be able to do that, and I continued to improve, and I had a whole year to do it. So that the first year, getting used to being a part of that program and how demanding it was. I look back and I just remember thinking, wow, this is hard. This is going to be tough. But at the same time, had so much fun. Loved it.
Well, that first year when you're redshirting, what primarily was your role on a day-to-day basis in practice? Was it scout team stuff? Were you working on obviously your individual development was something you've already talked about a little bit here, getting better at, but if you're not going to be in the games, I'm sure Coach Knight doesn't want you to be a wasted resource. So what's your day-to-day responsibilities when you're a redshirt player on a team that obviously has national championship aspirations?
Well, he did a great job of, he never gives you a day off, right? And he coaches everybody hard. And so even though I wasn't eligible to check into a game, you'd have never known that. It's not like they push you to the side and forget about you for a year. Get treated just the same as everybody else. And I think in my case, I think he was seeing me improve. And I think he started getting excited going, this guy's going to get better. I'm going to stay on him. So it's not like I was at the other end of the court, by myself that season. I mean, you're engaged in every part of it. I mean, you're playing on the scout team. But when I'm making mistakes, he's all over me, he's pushing me to improve. So just because you're redshirted, that guy doesn't forget about you. If anything else, it's, put your game under the microscope and to make sure that that he's got the staff pushing me every day to improve. So you get a lot of attention with him. He was the best. I mean, just the absolute best. If you want to push yourself and get better, there's no better place to go or a person to play for than Coach Knight.
Well, in terms of your improvement over your career, if you look at your career stats and kind of your progression over your 4 years, it's constant improvement just in terms of, your production. I mean, you went from your freshman year shooting 35% on threes to your second year, you're almost at 46%. That's the kind of, year-over-year improvement that a coach wants to see. What do you think was the biggest, driving factor beyond that? Obviously, coaching has a lot to do with it, but a lot of times, and even so now with IU basketball, there's a lot of talk about player development and whether guys get better year over year. How much is that on you as a player to put in the extra work and kind of get that extra time in the gym to make that progression? It can't all just be on the coaches is kind of my assumption, but I'm just curious kind of how you viewed the responsibility as a player to get better and progress year over year and how much extra work that took you to do so.
Well, I think that you hit it on the head. I mean, I think every IU fan, and I'm certainly back to being a fan again, and I can tell you that I wondered and have worried about the player development, in recent years down there and question it, and don't see guys maybe making the leaps that you want them to. But it has to come from the player too. It's not like you say, this coaching staff isn't developing players enough. What are those guys doing? And I, to be honest, I'm not close enough to the program to answer that question. Certainly we were watching guys not make the improvements that we wanted to make. And, it's not just the coach. You hit it on the head. What kind of buy-in, are you going to get from the player? I mean, I know I wanted to be a great player. And I had to make sacrifices if I wanted to get there, and so it's not, going to the required practices. It's what are you going to do, beyond that? How much time and energy are you going to put into it? How serious are you about, how passionate are you about being good? I really wanted to be a good player. I pushed myself a lot. I knew I had a lot of room for improvement. And so I feel like I did. I feel like I put the time in, certainly during the off season, as much, if not more than anybody around me. I was putting in the time and we talked about, I was making the leaps. I knew I was getting better. And as you progress through your career there, we had a great team. There's a lot of great players, and you got Alan Henderson and Calvert, and Damon Bailey and Greg Graham. It's a lot of NBA guys.
Yeah.
And every year, one of those guys or two of those guys graduates, and there's opportunity, for somebody to step into those roles and take, and fill their shoes. And so that was part of it too. It was, you become an upperclassman for Coach Knight, more is expected of you, and every year I knew more was going to be expected of me. And that's a great motivator to put in all that time and effort, because you know that he's going to call your number and you don't want to let him down.
In terms of shooting, that's something too that I want to get into a little bit with you later, just in terms of the last couple of years of IU basketball, maybe the shooting not being what people want to see, but yourself as a shooter, what I get this question a lot, and I actually have this question, for my own son who's a fourth grader playing basketball. What's the key to becoming a great shooter? Is it repetition? Is it just getting in the gym and getting shots up? Is there one or two things you can point to that makes a great shooter?
Well, it has been frustrating, hasn't it? Watching recently, it's like where are these kids that they're going to be out there? I watch other games and I see shot makers and really good shooting. Like if a guy gets left alone at the 3-point line, he's going to knock. You feel like he's going to knock it down. And then you watch us and we're like we don't ever get open and we don't ever knock it down. It has been frustrating. I feel like they're out there. The shooters are out there. I don't know that there's any other. I don't know that there's a formula. I've been asked by neighbors and parents, people that have teenage kids or boys, they want them to be great basketball players. They ask me all the time, what did you do in the summertime? How did you become a good shooter? And you dig it out of the ground. I mean, you take hundreds of shots, thousands of shots. You stay committed to it. You got to stay in the gym. I mean, there's just, I don't know of a shortcut. It's get your butt in the gym and stay in the gym. You gotta love it. I mean, that's the other thing is I loved it, right? So it didn't feel like work. Me and my buddies, in Terre Haute growing up, we were all junkies, basketball junkies. We were playing all summer. Anytime we could find an open gym, we weren't going to leave it. We were going to stay in there all day. So, that's what we like to do. We love doing it. So I don't even like talking about it like it was all this hard work I put in, because I just was having fun. We loved it.
So you go from a guy who wasn't sure that Bob Knight actually offered a scholarship, and you committed kind of on a whim to a Big Ten MVP in your final season in Bloomington. And looking at your stats that year, there's not too many guys who are 6'8" playing 37 minutes a game in the Big Ten, even today. I mean, that's in terms of durability, that's pretty impressive. So your development over those 4 years kind of culminated in that final season where, you average 21.2 points per game. I mean, that's not too many guys are getting 20 a game in the Big Ten. What do you remember about that season, and what, I guess on an individual level, how rewarding was it just for you to see all of that work that you put in over your career rewarded with just really a fantastic way to go out in terms of, an individual season for your IU career?
Every year, like we talked about, more was expected of you, and you wanted it. You wanted the workload, and I tried to condition myself in the summertime so I could play as many minutes as he wanted me on the court. And unless we were blowing somebody out or I was in foul trouble, he knew that I had conditioned myself to play 40 minutes. And so, Coach was great. So much has to do with him. When I say he pushed me, that's not it. It doesn't even do it justice. He challenged me all the time. Challenged me, called me into his office. He'd show me a 5-minute video of Chris Mullin highlights in the NBA, and he coached him during the '84 Olympic Games. And he'd show me a film on him, and he'd say, why can't that be you? Why can't you be Chris Mullin? And just constantly challenging me to elevate, to that next level. And I was so appreciative of his coaching. You just don't want to let him down. He's just the kind of person you just don't want to let him down. It just happened. And so that season, I wasn't thinking about averaging 22 points a game. It was just, you're trying to do everything you can to contribute to Indiana basketball winning games. And I had statistically a good season, and it ended poorly. I mean, we lost in the first round of the tournament, and unfortunately, that's how I remember the year, and I know that's how Coach remembers the seasons. And back then we were trying to win championships, and so losing the first round is a big letdown. We didn't win the conference. We tied for second, and Purdue won the Big Ten. That's not a good season, and individually it was, but that's not what I was hoping for my senior, the year I'm captaining, his ball club. When you finish second to Purdue, that was unacceptable back then. I think, in more recent years, we'd be excited to have a second place finish, but Coach was not okay with that. And yeah, I won Big Ten Player of the Year, and, I didn't go to the press conference. We were grinding so hard to win in the tournament. I mean, I didn't go to Chicago to receive it was called the Chicago Tribune, Big Ten Player of the Year trophy. I didn't even go up there to get it. They just sent it in a box. There wasn't press conferences. Coach was not going to celebrate individual success, which I love. Yeah. I mean, that's fantastic. I wasn't interested in it either. it came, and I'm proud of it. Looking back, I'm proud of it. But at the time, it's just not what we were about, which I love. That's what I love about Indiana basketball. It's about the name on the front. It's about Indiana on the front and no name on the back.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So when you look back on your 5 years in Bloomington, what's your best memory? Is there an individual moment or moments that you can point to and say this is something that really stood out?
I got asked that not too long ago, and I was actually with Steve Green. We were together and being asked about maybe our favorite moments, and it may have been last February when Coach came back to Assembly Hall. That was about as cool of a day or as cool of a event that I've ever been a part of. And for it to be in Assembly Hall, Coach night there, all these former players surrounding him, and then seeing the love and appreciation from the fans, it was really cool to be a part of that.
So I want to get into the last, let's say, 21 years of IU basketball. You've been a fan of IU basketball for your whole life. Obviously, you lived it as a player, but since you've left IU, I've seen you. I've been going to games regularly for the last 12, 13 years doing this. I've seen you at games. I've seen you honored multiple times. You're in the IU Hall of Fame, but I think your voice is one that people respect because you care about IU basketball still to this day, and you want to see it succeed. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, as somebody who watches the games, who has followed the program, the last, there's been some years that have been successful just in terms of, Crean winning the Big Ten a couple of times and things like that. But overall, the inconsistencies, I think, have driven a lot of fans crazy and just kind of wondering why programs like Wisconsin and Michigan State, have kind of taken Indiana's place really in the hierarchy in the Big Ten. What do you think maybe led to that? Obviously, there's anytime you're trying to replace one of the, 2 or 3 best coaches to ever do it, there's going to be some type of it's impossible, obviously, to replace what Bob Knight did at Indiana. But the inconsistencies, what have you kind of seen from just a fan perspective that's led to that, and how, I guess, hopeful are you now with Mike Woodson installed that maybe there's a change coming just in terms of getting IU basketball back to at least being relevant on a year-to-year basis on a national level?
Well, there's no denying that maybe a couple of those other schools have slid into maybe that spot, but I think it was hard to replace John Wooden. I think UCLA went through it. When somebody has that big of shoes to fill, sustained success is a tough thing to measure, and we've had a hard time. And there's no denying that. I don't think we had at times maybe the best leadership down there, whether that was in the hiring process. I think we were trying to get so far away from my vantage point, trying to get away from Coach Knight. So we wanted to go a completely different direction, and we wouldn't consider anybody that had any ties to Coach Knight. Well, that's I don't know that that's the right approach, right? This guy did a lot of great things. I realized towards the end, he and the university were not seeing eye to eye and had really rubbed each other the wrong way. But when it comes to the game of basketball and coaching, how many are better than him? So why would our strategy be to get as far away from him as possible? That doesn't make any sense to me. But at the time, it was a different time and place. I worry. I worry that we're not going to get it back. And I've always got on board with whoever we've hired because I'm a fan first, and I love the program. I want to see us succeed. And I think with hiring Mike Woodson, we're on our way. And when you bring back Dane Fife, and we're putting all the resources towards it. Everybody wants it to happen. There's never going to be a bigger spotlight on Indiana basketball than there is right now. I mean, it is an exciting time. I'm excited for what might come. And I haven't had this much excitement in a long, long time. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of seasons in the last 21 that we've gone in thinking we're a Big Ten, championships on the line and a deep run into the tournament. And maybe 1 or 2 years we felt that way, and that's not enough. It's not enough. And Indiana basketball is better than that. And so I'm excited. I really think there's reason now to be excited for the fall to come. It can't come fast enough.
So looking back kind of on those 21 years, you mentioned a couple good seasons in there, but for the most part, and this is just me speaking personally, I don't know if you agree with this, you can disagree if you want, but really the last 4 years under Archie Miller, I think it started with a lot of excitement just in terms of him saying the right things and wanting to it seemed like to me he wanted former players to be a part of things at the beginning, but that to me died down over the years. I didn't really see much, at least publicly, that suggested that there was a lot of interest in that. What were your interactions with the program, if any, over the last 4 years? And were you surprised at all just at how quickly things kind of went south just in terms of the wins and losses? Because it did seem like early on he had some momentum recruiting, and he did get some really good players from the state of Indiana, but it also seemed like just in terms of an identity from the program, it never really felt like there was anything you could point to on the court or off the court that he was building there.
Yeah, it was a strange 4 years, and I got asked by a lot of people, I mean, are you connected to the Well, I love the program,
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be a part, I'm not in coaching. And, Archie doesn't owe me anything. He didn't owe me a text or an invitation to the games. I can get tickets to the games if I want to go to the games, right? I'm a fan. I think it's a little bit overplayed and overemphasized, like getting the former players involved, I don't know that that's important. I want us to win. That's it. I just want Indiana basketball to win and put a product in the court that we're proud of and excited to watch. And, guys that you want them to come back the next year, or you want to see them improve. I mean, that's what we always did. Right. And so I don't think that Archie ever owes any former players anything. And, I just think it got talked about way too much, former players and their opinions. I'm a fan. I want us to win. That's all I care about. And that's a big job. That's a huge job. And it's recruiting. There's so much that goes into it. He doesn't need to spend his time, kissing the asses of former players. That's not part of the job detail in my mind. And get to work. I'd rather know that he's out hustling around, trying to get players and get talent and build a great roster. And that's really how I felt about it every time, whether it was Kelvin Sampson or Tom Crean. I mean, Coach Crean at first seemed like he was really wanted to involve guys and make you part of the program, and that kind of died off with him for whatever reason. And they're all different, but the thing that I believe is that is a huge job that those guys have and a ton of responsibility, and they should spend their time trying to win, not trying to, screw around talking and kissing butts of former players. And, I think the job got really big for Coach Crean and kind of swallowed him after a while. I think it just, it is a tough job. We're demanding, we want to win. And nowadays with social media, there's just so much talking going on about and dissecting the program. It's changed so much because of technology in the last 20 years.
So what you just said there brings up a question that I've kind of pondered as somebody that writes about IU basketball for a living, someone that interacts with fans on, sometimes a minute-to-minute basis with looking at message boards and all that stuff. And there's so many different opinions on what IU basketball should be. And this is kind of a loaded question, but what are reasonable expectations for IU basketball on a year-to-year basis? I'm not sure it's fair to judge the program now and compare and expect kind of what Knight did in his glory years as what to expect. But to me, I would say, finishing, in the top 5 or 6 of the Big Ten and giving yourselves a good chance to make the tournament every year would be a good start. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean that should be we should always make the tournament and compete for a Big Ten championship. And I don't even like saying the top 5 or 6 in the Big Ten. We should be able to compete for a Big Ten title. You're not going to win it every year.
Right.
The Big Ten's going to be competitive, but we've got to be competitive. You got to be able to go on the road and win games. You got to have a toughness to you that I don't know that we've had enough, at least enough of. And that's not pinning it on the coach or just the players. It's collectively, and that's what's so great about it, Indiana basketball. It's all about that team and putting everything into it. I do worry that kids have changed a lot, and it's too much about the individual and their progression and their, are they trending towards the NBA? Well, so few guys go on to play in the NBA. I think nowadays kids all think they're going to play in the NBA. And that's just not the case. And so it needs to be more about team. I hope that's what he's bringing back to Bloomington. I know he's bringing back a lot of Coach Knight's philosophies, and if that's the case, we're going to be okay.
It seems like he's off to a pretty good start just in terms of that the team stuff that you speak about, with the fact that Trace Jackson Davis is coming back without even looking at the NBA. I mean, a guy that averaged 20 a game in the Big Ten last season, first team All Big Ten. Mike Woodson comes in, has a couple meetings with him, and he's not even looking at the NBA. He's coming back next year. What did you think of that move?
Smart move. Smart move. I've always been surprised at guys that want to leave. I wasn't that type of player. I needed those 5 years to develop and try to turn myself into a pro. I look at him, at Trace Jackson Davis. I didn't think he was ready to leave. I mean, I thought he'd been silly to race off to, what are supposed to be greener pastures, but I don't know that they would have been for him. I look at him as a guy that needed to develop and build a jump shot and develop a right hand. He needed to come back to school, and with Coach Woodson there now, with that could really assess him from an NBA perspective and say, hey, here's the things. My guess is it wasn't chummy me. It was like, hey, here's the things that I think you need to work on. I've watched you play 35 games. Here's what we want to develop in you. Here's what we think we could turn you into. That has to be exciting, and obviously it was exciting for Trace. I'm happy for him. I think he made a really good decision to come back, and I do think we're going to have a staff that's going to be able to develop talent, and that's exciting. And so this kid, in my mind, wasn't an NBA guy, or he's not one right now, but I certainly think he can be, and I think he made a great decision.
Mike Woodson, there was some skepticism when he was hired in terms of his lack of experience as being a college coach, but the guy had a really successful head coaching career in the NBA when you look at what he did in Atlanta. And, you think about the Knicks, they've been a pretty bad franchise now for a long time. And really the only years you think about in recent history that the Knicks were even relevant, he was the head coach. So it seems to me that from an X's and O's perspective and knowing the game of basketball, Mike Woodson is a terrific hire. What's your relationship with Mike Woodson? Do you know him very well? And what can you tell us just in terms of what he's going to bring to Bloomington as the Indiana basketball coach?
Well, I don't know him well. Just a hello. I've never spent any time around him. He was an assistant in the NBA when I was 3 years playing in the NBA. I'd see him a few times a year and say hello, and really that's about it. So I haven't spent any time with him. I obviously know a lot of people that know him really well. There's not a person that says a bad word about him. He's, everybody says, hey, Woody's consistent. Woody's a great guy. Everybody loves him. I mean, that's the reputation, right? As far as what's he going to do, I hope he's going to win. I don't know him. I don't know him from an X's and O's standpoint. You don't get this job unless you've got all the chops.
Right.
I'm sure he's great with Sure, he's great with a clipboard in his hand. You can't fake it in the NBA. That wasn't a roster, a championship caliber roster by any means. But he had them winning. I mean, and he had guys improving. This guy knows the game. I mean, there's no question. You don't end up as the coach at Indiana unless you know how to coach. And I think he knows how to motivate players. I know that I've heard great things about his on the court, like workout approach. He's going to be out there getting these guys better. I mean, he's not going to be watching from the sideline. The guy's going to be on the court working his butt off. And I know a lot of people that have said great things. Guys that I've talked to recently, they're like, hey, he's fantastic. He's going to develop these guys. And he's going to be demanding, which I love. And he's going to demand for guys to improve. He's going to demand to do things the way he wants it done. That's exciting for Indiana basketball. There's going to be accountability there again. I feel like that's one spot that we were soft. Where's the accountability? He's going to bring that back to Bloomington.
The other thing I've said to people when I've talked about this is that you don't last as long as he did in the NBA if you're not able to connect with players and gain the respective locker room. Because at that level, in many ways, it's a players' league, and if something goes wrong, it's not the players that are gone; it's the coach. And for him to have the career that he did, and the success that he had, especially building up Atlanta, kind of from the ground up and getting them to the playoffs, I think that speaks a lot to how he was able to connect with guys and get them to believe in what he was trying to do.
No, I agree with you. I do. I think he's good. Like I said, I haven't been this excited for a season in a long time. This is going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of chatter. I mean, I think as the fall draws near, people are going to be excited, and people are going to be excited right away about this team. The roster is going to turn over a little bit. I think he's going to put a really good product out there. It's going to be fun to see him on the sideline. I'm excited to see Dane back on the sideline, see those guys together. Thad Matta being a part of this, I'm anxious to kind of watch that unfold and see, from at least my perspective or from my vantage point, how involved he is on a day-to-day basis. I'm excited to learn about it. Dane's a friend of mine. I'm sure be talking to him every few weeks or so, and I'm just excited about Indiana basketball again. And it hasn't been exciting enough over the last 5 to 10 years.
How important do you think it was for Scott Dolson to not just look at this as a head coach, but in terms of just a team of people? You mentioned the Thad Matta hire, Dane Fife, Kenya Hunter being retained from the previous staff. They've hired a third assistant, Yasir Roseman. They're keeping Mike Roberts around. To me, just in terms from top to bottom, this seems like, the best staff that they've assembled in recent memory.
I have to agree. I mean, I haven't been excited about a staff. I got to admit, I don't even know who our assistants were. I didn't even know those guys' names. I don't know where they came from. I didn't know their pedigree. I do know this staff, right? I do know where all these guys have been. And they share some of that DNA, right? The Indiana basketball DNA, I think, is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And now we've got more of it in Assembly Hall, which I think is a big deal. How big of a deal? Well, it's not going to be if we don't win. It's going to come down to if we're winning and we're winning with guys that we love, it's just going to make it that much more fun.
Well, Brian, I feel like I could talk IU basketball with you for hours, but we got time limitations here, so I want to get you out of here. But I definitely appreciate the time, and maybe once the games get going again next season, I'd like to have you on just to maybe talk what you've seen. It's I think a lot of people will be excited to hear just how closely you follow the program and how much you care about the success of IU basketball. I think that's one thing that makes the program so great is the former players. I know that people love to see former players come back. So hopefully we'll see you often at games in the coming years, and hopefully there's a lot more exciting days to come, just in terms of wins and losses, and getting a program again that people can be happy about and cheer for again.
Well, thank you very much for having me. A pleasure talking to you. You got my contact information. You can reach out anytime. I'd be happy to come back on your show, and once the season rolls around, and talk IU hoops. Obviously, I love it. I haven't found a former player that's a bigger fan than me. So I do think I'm the biggest fan to ever get to wear the candy stripes. I do hold that title.
Who are some other guys that are in the neighborhood in terms of fandom with you? Are there guys like you'll text during games or anything like that?
Joe Hillman and I mean, we're buddies. He loves it, and he didn't grow up in Indiana, but he's been here ever since he played, and he's a big fan. We can be critical of the program. We have been lately.
Yeah.
And but yeah, he's great. I got to believe Steve Alford. He's probably in the neighborhood of a guy that was a big fan as a kid, like I was, and then got to live out his dreams and play there. But see, ever since he's gone, right? He's in coaching, so that's why I'm number one. He can't. I'm here. I'm watching all the games. I love it. I loved it as a kid. I wasn't the 5-star that he was, but at the same time, I got to be the biggest. I got to be the biggest fan that played. I got to believe that.
Well, thanks again, Brian, for your time, and everybody, thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed, leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll be back again next week with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.